Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
Welcome, everybody, to a special broadcast, and especially this holiday season. I had the great opportunity to sit down with my friends Matt and Laurie Crouch on the set at TBN just a few days ago, really to discuss the book that we've written called Unholy Alliance, dealing with Iran, Russia, jihadism. And as we celebrate the holiday season, but also as we look at the nature of what we're facing as a country, we want you to be educated and informed. So we had a great discussion, and I thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity for you to hear some of the discussion that took place between me and Matt and Laurie dealing with this issue of the Unholy Alliance. And then TBN had a very special offer on how you can actually get the book for any donation of any amount through TBN. There's an 800 number up on the screen right now, and you could use that number to get the book Unholy Alliance, and it's a signed copy of the book. So we encourage you to do that. Here's that interview.
Sekulow is with us for this entire 90 minutes. This is a live program. We welcome you to Praise. I'm Matthew Crouch, my wife Laurie. Jay, we're talking about your latest book,
Yep.
Unholy Alliance.
Yep.
Why is this book, the content of this book, why is it relevant for now, this minute? What's going on inside this book?
Well, look, we're in a position in our history, and in the United States right now, actually, where we're in a transition of government. And that's when our enemies view us as the most vulnerable.
Wow.
And that's, I mean, in Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green Party, it doesn't matter. When we're going through a transition of government, we do it peacefully in the United States, unlike other countries, but we're deemed to be vulnerable. By who? Well, by groups that are operating with a theological ideology, and that is this version of Islam they're jihadists. I don't even like calling it radical Islam anymore. I don't think that's the fair word. They're jihadists. They are bent on the destruction of the West. They want to disrupt our way of life, the freedoms that we enjoy, from freedom of speech to freedom of religion to free exercise. I mean, this is a mentality, Matt and Laurie, that we have to understand because it's an intergenerational conflict. So I wrote Unholy Alliance because the players are lining up in a very different way than most of us thought it was going to be. You've got Russia becoming a major force in the Middle East again. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, they've been vacant from the Middle East. They're now the major force. They're working with the Iranians. The Iranians are bent on one thing, exporting their version of Sharia. So they will fight with the Sunni. The Shia will fight with the Sunni. But they will also join forces with the Sunni if it's going to end a common enemy. Who's the common enemy? The United States and Israel. Israel's the little enemy. They're the ones in the way. And then the United States is the big target because we're the real constitutional republic. We're the ones that believe in liberty and freedom, and that's what they want to end. So it's an exporting the revolution.
Okay. Sekulow, I'm holding up your latest book. You are a #1 New York Times best-selling author. That was for your book, The Rise of ISIS.
Right.
This is the follow-up book,
Right.
Unholy Alliance by Sekulow. That 800 number is on the screen for you. For those watching, this will end all doubt whether or not this is a live program. We've just been through
Literally.
a presidential election.
Right.
Today is November 17th, 2016. And this subject matter is more important this minute than it would have been even prior to. So, you know, in America, like you've just pointed out, you know, we have a peaceful transition of power. We celebrate that, and that's what we all believe in, regardless of politics.
Right.
You know, you had a really good statement about politics back in the green room,
So,
which
I mean, look, we've had this big transition of government now. We're in that process. We're in the next 60 days, basically, till the president-elect becomes the president. And politics is important. But Abraham Kuyper, famous theologian, Dutch theologian, famously said, politics are important, we should engage in politics, but remember this, politics never raised anyone from the dead. And I think that is, I think we have to operate with that assumption, and because it's not just an assumption, it's a fact.
Yeah.
So engaging in politics is important, but at the end of the day, that is not the message that prevails.
Right.
And that's you know, what you all are doing every day around the world is offering hope. And in this book, even with a topic as hard as this, in the sense that, I mean, this isn't a pretty picture when you've got the Iranians and the Russians and the Syrians in cahoots. And you look at that, but I end it with offering hope. You've got to have hope here. And we need to understand the conflict we're in. Because, as I said, Matt and Laurie, they think intergeneral. In the United States, we're kind of like the Israelis. We like our wars 6 days, 2 weeks.
Right.
You know, the United States, we're not really great on 15-year wars.
Yeah.
But they think intergenerationally. It's the 1,000-year war. It's the 100-year war. That's how they're looking at it.
I'm going to have a lot more with our interview with Matt and Laurie Crouch on the set of TBN, the book, Unholy Alliance. There's a number on the screen from TBN. You could get it. We encourage you to do it. You'll be helping TBN out. You'll be helping us out at the same time. Back with more in a moment. We've got more discussion ahead on this. Look, we're talking about the book Unholy Alliance. I had a great interview time with Matt and Laurie Crouch on TBN at the set of the Praise program. I want to go right to that as we discuss the book.
You are known as a free speech
Right.
lawyer. This studio that we're producing this program in, you would have been here in the early 80s.
Yes.
We've known each other for
Most of our adult lives.
generations. Yeah, I don't know that I've not known you.
Yep, right.
And so, Jay, maybe people don't know that your current resume includes 12 arguments at the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
I was here the week after my first case
Right.
on this set, a different set, but in this building, in 1987.
Isn't that something?
It was, that was a dozen cases ago that I've argued. We've done 20, but I've argued 12 of them. Yeah. So I mean, it's been a long time. We've known each other a long time.
Okay, so I want to talk about
Yeah.
this book, this subject.
Yeah.
Chapter 10
Yep.
jumped out to me,
Yep.
and I want to get into chapter
Yep.
10 in regard to this. So, for those watching, let me just set something up. You know, I don't know when. Maybe Jay will set a date here later on in the broadcast when Jesus is coming back. But all of this geopolitics
Yeah.
stuff is really, so for those that are watching tonight, and again, tonight's live, if you have any questions, you can call in. We're right here in the studio. The operators, or some of
That's
the
great.
operators, are right here in the studio if you have a question. But we're talking about the Unholy Alliance, this conflict that is going on in Syria. The United States is basically withdrawn.
Right.
There's a vacuum of power, and it's being filled.
Right.
Okay. So, you know, Bible prophecy
Right.
and what's happening right now, to those people that love that subject, and there are many,
Right.
how do you connect
Well,
this
I mean-
book into what that
Well,
is?
we're living it. I mean, this is what's discussed in the book. I mean, when you talk about Iran, you talk about Russia, this is not far into the scriptures.
Yeah.
So we are living out and seeing and witnessing biblical fulfillments every day, every single day. The problem is, and this is where the reason we wrote the book, and the reason I wanted to write this particular book was to understand the times and seasons we live in. I mean, we're supposed to be able to understand the times and seasons we live in. You've got to understand the history. This is not, you said it right, Matt. None of this has happened in a vacuum. This didn't, pop up overnight. Even the Iranian Revolution, the 1979 Iranian Revolution, was brewing for decades.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Persian Empire, we forget about these things, that Iran was this huge empire. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. We see, remember seeing the movie with Omar Sharif. I mean, great movie, interesting guy, understood, was in an era, which now we would say, how could that even be, was pro-Arab and pro-Jewish. Pro-Israel, the establishment of a Jewish state, and pro-Arab. Now, that was not unusual then. It's a lot more complicated now. But he came in contact with the Persians, with the Shia. And that's a branch of Islam. And that is the more radical, not that the Sunnis aren't radical, it's a different way. But he said they were surly and fanatical, willing to kill the Sunni as well as the Christian.
Yeah.
So then you've had this geopolitical situation. Look, Israel's existence as a Jewish state fundamentally reshaped our generation. I want to say that for because until the establishment of a Jewish state, and people say, well, the right of Israel to exist, yes, but as a Jewish state. So this is that's a fulfillment, of course, of Scripture. But I think it has shaped, without question, our generation. When I look at our generation, we were shaped by the Middle East conflict.
Correct.
Unfortunately, our kids' generation are also being shaped by that conflict. Unfortunately, reality is, at the time of Scripture itself, in the Old Testament, it was being shaped by the Middle East. So what we're witnessing in the sense today, and what we're having to deal with today, is as old as the Scriptures itself. And I think what we have to do, and the reason that this became a burden to get this out was, it is a complicated history that I wanted to make understandable so that when we talk about these issues, we can address what the real problem is. And like I said, the last chapter is the chapter of hope. I mean, we have the message of hope at the end of the day, because these battles can go on for a long time. You talked about the vacuum. We've evacuated the Middle East. I mean, and the Russians came back in. I mean, you understand, the Russians have one aircraft carrier. One, that's it. But they wanted a warm water port, so they get it in Syria. That's the deal for propping up Assad. The problem is, if you get rid of Assad, who's next?
Yep.
Is it the devil you know worse than the devil you don't know? I mean, these are the things you have to understand. So we kind of laid this out in a very understandable way. I mean, this was research I did at Oxford, but I wrote it so that anybody that is watching us right now would get a real understanding of where we've been, where we're going, and how we can contain this. We have to. Look, at the end of the day, we know we win. Okay, we clearly carry the day. But we're going through this time of turmoil in our country, and it's serious. And what's going on in the Middle East right now, as it relates to Israel, as it relates to Christian persecution, you all have been very helpful on a number of programs, because we've had a lot of people we've represented in the Middle East, Christians and others, that have just been, I have a situation right now, we got two. One I can't really talk about yet. As soon as I can, I will let you all know first, but it's a very serious situation. Another one in Sudan. These are just examples of literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being displaced. And we have to understand what our role is, not only biblically, but right now, this moment today, as the United States of America, we are that beacon of hope. Yeah. And we are the land of the free. We got to act like the home of the brave. And I think our military does a great job if you let them do their job.
Yes.
We are talking with Jay Sekulow, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, in addition to many other things that he does. His book, Unholy Alliance, is available right now. 800 numbers on the screen. And we have coordinated basically with Simon & Schuster,
yep.
and your
Howard
schedule,
Books.
our
Yep.
schedule. Today is November 17th. We're live tonight. And if you're watching while we're live, give us a call. And if we have any questions,
Matt, one of the things I mentioned to you and Laura before, we've got the capability of signing these books, and I would be happy to do. I would like to do that. So we'll get that to anybody that gets the book. When I'm hopeful, and where I'm hopeful is, I know we have that message of hope. What I want to see happen is that we, as a body of believers, understand exactly where we are, not only as it relates to current events, but where all this has come from. And as I said, it is as old as the Scripture itself. The next book I'm doing is on Israel, and I'm going through the legal, theological, archaeological support for the existence of Israel as a Jewish state, because now we have to defend that. Who would have thought in our parents' generation would never have to be defending this like we're now having to do?
Right.
I'm going to have a lot more with our interview with Matt and Laurie Crouch on the set of TBN, the book, Unholy Alliance. There's a number on the screen from TBN. You could get it. We encourage you to do it. You'll be helping TBN out. You'll be helping us out at the same time. Back with more in a moment. We've got more discussion ahead on this. Look, we're talking about the book Unholy Alliance. I had a great interview time with Matt and Lori Crouch on TBN at the set of the Praise program. I want to go right to that as we discuss the book.
For those that are just tuning in, we are here in Southern California. It's a beautiful day. Our guest, Jay Sekulow. November day in Southern California. It was like 80 degrees today. It was amazing. Most of the people there could be some watching right now that are going, wait a second, isn't that guy from Fox News?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's him.
There
There's that guy. Okay, so Jay, some people also are going, boy, his voice sounds familiar. Because they listen to you on the radio.
Right.
And so you're here with us tonight, and let me back up
absolutely.
just a touch.
Let's do it.
You are known for civil liberties.
Right.
You are known in Washington. So how did a good Jewish boy from
Born in Brooklyn, actually.
from those kind of sensibilities start moving into this kind of subject matter? You're really talking kind of foreign policy issues.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Well,
where did this come from?
It's very personal. So
Okay.
the story that a lot of people probably don't know is that I'm the grandson of a Russian immigrant. My grandfather came to the United States in 1914 through Ellis Island. His name was Shmulik, Samuel.
Wow.
So that was the American version of it. Sekulow was how the name was pronounced. And he was a fruit peddler in Brooklyn, New York. I mean, he sold fruit from a little stand.
Wow.
And his grandson, me, I've gotten to argue cases at the Supreme Court of the United States, at the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
Wow.
So, I take this very personally. My grandfather left Russia with his family, he was 14, because of persecution against Jews in Russia. My very first case, though, was at the Supreme Court of the United States, was Board of Airport Commissioners versus Jews for Jesus, which I'm pretty sure my grandfather would not have thought would be the case I'd be arguing. And that's a whole nother story. But so I look at this very personally. I mean, especially when you're dealing with this region of the world.
Yeah.
So there's a family connect here. And then taking it to the kind of the logical next step, you're right. I mean, there's the constitutional lawyer, religious liberty and free speech. I was in a meeting back in 2000. It was right after the elections. And in 2001, there was this whole concern about travel warnings to Israel. You may remember this. And the travel warnings to go to Israel were higher than going to Syria. I mean, it was ridiculous. And I worked on getting that changed. And what I saw by working in the political system within Washington, D.C. was if you build relationships and trust and have advocacy behind that actually makes sense. One of my, I would say, adversaries in court oftentimes said the reason I was so dangerous is because I sound so reasonable. I think we have a reason, and we're reasonable. But I was able to see back in almost 15 years ago that we could engage this. I did, one of the greatest honors I've had in my life, besides being a father and a grandfather, I need to say, which is the greatest thing, was I got to make a presentation before the United Nations at the General Assembly in New York just in June. And it was in defense of Israel and this whole attempt to delegitimize the Jewish state. I was thinking to myself, I get on that podium, it's gigantic. I mean, it's, when you go to the Supreme Court of the United States, I mean, the podium's not much wider than this table. You go to this, and you've seen it, I mean, you go to this, well, there it is. I mean, you feel like an ant. And then you realize who else has touched that wood and that table. I mean, from great world leaders to dictators.
Yep.
And there I was, the grandson of Shmulik, at the UN. And Matt and Lori, it was one of those moments in your life where you realize that God had orchestrated it. There's no way you could have done this yourself, could not have happened, that this was God just every step of the way. So how do you go from the Supreme Court case, Board of Airport Commissioners versus Jews for Jesus, to standing up at the United Nations, giving a defense of Israel for the UN? So all of that kind of came together. And I realized, and institutionally we look, I mean, y'all are running a global network. I mean, huge. We have a global organization. You have to be, you've got to, it's the old story, pray with your eyes open. Within the Jewish tradition, there was this tradition, pray with your eyes open. And people say, well, that's irreverent. It wasn't. It was, Jesus prayed with his eyes open. I mean, he looked towards heaven and, open his eyes towards heaven. Pray with your eyes open because you see where God's moving in different avenues, in different areas. And what we saw was there was a lot of people talking a lot about these issues, but it was how do you convert the talking to doing?
Yep.
How do you implement, educate, litigate if you need to? I mean, I've done representation now at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, which gave me a whole new appreciation for our American justice system. Let me just tell you that. And it ended successfully, so I don't want to belittle the International Criminal Court in The Hague. But this is not justice like you and I we would all think of justice. And you look at all these tribunals and what you're having to deal with, and I give your family a lot of credit for this. I mean, you talk about the Fox News thing. Do you know what I think honed my skills at the Supreme Court more than anything else? In this chair, but a chair on this set.
Yeah.
And those interviews all those years ago. Because what happens when you're dealing with that, then you're dealing with the 9 of them. It's not so complicated versus, live TV. And I think all of this was training. I didn't think that would be me at the UN. I mean, if you would have asked me that 8 months ago, I would have said no. But there it was. So God opens doors, go through them. Yeah. And also look at where the needs are. And we're seeing right now pockets of the world where the need is great. I mean, the crisis in the Middle East is a crisis in the Middle East. I mean, it is a significant crisis for religious minorities, especially Christians, but Yazidis and others. It is, we can't even relate to it. And then individual American citizens, and I talk about some of this in the book, when you're dealing with these, I have an office in Moscow. I mean, we have an office in Moscow. So you got to deal with the government, but you also have to understand why are the Russians dealing with the Iranians and also have a pretty good relationship with the Israelis. I mean, this has changed the entire geopolitical framework of how we view the world. So that lens that we looked through for most of our adult life ends up being completely incorrect.
Wow.
We were operating through the wrong lens. Scripture tells us the lens, but the politician, and that's where politics is important, but it doesn't raise people from the dead. And I think you have to be able to tie that together to understand the nature of the conflict we're in, and that there is, to say this is not a religious conflict, who are we kidding? That's politically correct, but legally incorrect as a matter of international law, biblically incorrect, and factually incorrect. This is, in a sense, a real religious conflict. Wow. And there's a fight within Islam itself. And then the radical, they say, well, it's only 10%. 10% of 1.7 billion people? Do the math. It's a lot of folk. Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do in Unholy Alliance is put all these pieces together in a coherent understanding, so at the end of it, we know what we have to do, but we also understand the conflict. I think I think oftentimes we look at it at the 60,000 foot level and ignore, it's the macro versus micro kind of thing. And I think what we've done here is we've laid it out so everybody can understand that this conflict goes back literally generations and generations.
So your family tie, your personal connection, this is a very serious subject matter to you. We're talking about Unholy Alliance. And your book prior to this was a New York Times #1 bestseller, Rise of ISIS. This is your follow-up, Unholy Alliance. Let me just read the piece right here. The agenda Iran, Russia, and jihadists share to conquer the world.
So let me unpack that a little bit.
Please.
So you would think Russia's had problems with jihadists. Serious problem with jihadists. They had a school that was taken over. They've had airplanes that have been
shot out of the sky.
Right? So they've dealt with terrorists, Chechenian rebels that were terrorists. I mean, they've dealt with this. But you ask yourself, why in the world would they align themselves with the Iranians who have one desire only? I mean, in Iran, the Revolutionary Guard, which is the Ayatollah's troops, so to speak, are probably the most deadly in the region. I'm not compared to Israel, but within the region, they are in other words, the idea that Russians said was, let's get the Iranians to engage in the conflict against ISIS. Let's get the Russians to engage ISIS. Let's get the Iranians to engage ISIS. Well, then you've got the Shia. The Russians, it's one thing, because it's not a theological fight for them. For the Iranians, it is. It's the Shia version of Islam, which is what they want to export, versus the Sunni version, which is ISIS. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He has this view that's different than the Iranians. And so you've got this internal combustion but the Russians see opportunity. Now, at the end of this, they don't want to share their power with the jihadists. They want the jihadists ultimately eliminated too. But in the interim, they don't mind coalescing. Because you have to ask yourself, for instance, there's a conflict we all know about. If you read the papers, you watch the news, you've got in Gaza the conflict with Hamas and Israel. Now, Hamas is Sunni. That's a branch of Islam. They get most of their funding from Iran, which is Shia. The Shia would never fund the Sunni 10 years ago.
Right.
They will now. Why? Common enemy. So they have changed their paradigm too. They've changed the way that they're engaging. So we have to look. I really do think we have looked at this completely. I mean, it's hard to say. How do you say you have all these experts on global affairs and completely got it wrong? But, I deal with evidence. That's what I do. I'm a lawyer. So I look at the evidence. The evidence says we got it wrong. I mean, not just a little bit. Not just us, by the way. And this isn't a political party. This is world opinion got this wrong. We underestimated significantly the facts as they were existing and the lethality upon which these groups could act.
Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast today. Let me again, as we do with each and every broadcast, your support of TBN makes a huge difference. And TBN is offering our book, Unholy Alliance, for a donation in any amount. So we encourage you to call the number that's on the screen. And I want to thank, again, Matt and Laurie Crouch and the whole TBN family for their support for the ACLJ for literally decades. We go back decades here. You're making a huge difference. We don't pay for this airtime. And that means I can deploy more lawyers in the field defending those who can't defend themselves. So thank you. We'll talk to you next week.